from the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast.
It's a harvest progress update as the Corn Belt waves goodbye to a September heat wave. Drought and dryness has North Dakota ranchers hustling to stockpile hay. In agribusiness, what about spring wheat markets?
Well, the drought was real,
Yeah.
and it really affected things tremendously.
The dairy report and price predictions, and the return of the condor to western skies.
AgDay, presented by the Chevy Silverado. High-strength steel for high-strength dependability.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Heat scorching much of the Corn Belt the last few days, but is it enough to dry down and mature the nation's crops? As we mentioned on Crop Tour in August, eastern Corn Belt farmers needing an extra few weeks to get crops to maturity. Well, in Indiana, some farmers are welcoming the warm up as those pockets and portions of fields that were replanted several times or late need that heat. And even with the heat, signs of a wet spring or other problems are still showing up in the field.
So the 80s that we're getting is very, very welcome. If we could have another 2 weeks of some 80s and the frost sometime in November, I think we would be ecstatic.
We'll have more from Indiana farmers and their crop conditions tomorrow morning as Bessie Gibbon kicks off our weekly I-80 Harvest Tour. Despite the heat in the Midwest last week, the crop progress report showing delays throughout the Corn Belt and much of the U.S. for that matter. Now, as far as corn harvested goes, overall, 11% is harvested, 6 points behind the 5-year average. All 5 states of the I-80 Tour are behind. Most are single digits, but Illinois corn harvest is 13 points behind. Of the 18 states that NASS surveys for corn, only Texas is actually ahead of the average. Now, as far as maturities go, Illinois, Minnesota, Wisconsin are all at least 20 points behind the 5-year average. Soybean harvest, it hit 10%. That's 2 points behind average. 63% of the soy crop is dropping leaves, which is right on par. And looking at winter wheat, 24% now planted, 4 points behind the 5-year average. With just 14% planted, Kansas is 6 points behind. This year's drought in the northern plains has made it much more difficult and expensive for farmers to build up enough feed to get their livestock through winter. Fortunately, what seems like a constant stream of semis loaded with bales of hay are moving through the barren state. Cliff Naylor from AgDay affiliate KFYR in Bismarck reports on the rush to stockpile hay in North Dakota.
A wave of hay has been heading west through North Dakota most of the summer. The supply line will continue throughout the fall and winter. Thousands of tons of feed are being hauled into North Dakota from as far away as Minnesota, Nebraska, Iowa, Kansas, and Wisconsin. Bales are also being brought from eastern areas of the state.
Well, there's no hay down there to be had, so everyone you talk to, they're either putting up kochia weed and hauling it home or putting up crop or whatever. So yeah, there are a lot of semis out there.
Central and western North Dakota ranchers have struggled with exceptional, extreme, and severe drought conditions all summer, limiting the amount of hay they've been able to put up.
We haven't put nothing up.
Dorothy Meschke and her husband Carl raised 200 head of cattle in the southwest corner of the state near Amadon, the area of North Dakota that's been hit the hardest by drought. They're hauling hay themselves to cut costs.
This is excellent hay. We were very fortunate to find this. We found this on Hayline.
The state agriculture department set up a website to connect producers who need to buy hay with sellers who have it. The internet page also lists truckers who are hauling feed. The Meschkes are buying 300 tons of hay and trucking it 200 miles. They can only stack 15 bales on their trailer, so it'll take 26 trips to get this feed home.
We just have to bite the bullet if you don't want to sell your cattle down.
The going rate to have hay hauled is $140 to $150 a ton.
It's sure a lot cheaper to be hauling it ourselves than paying a semi to do it.
Dorothy works as a substitute teacher in the fall, but she isn't taking any classroom assignments until this hay is hauled home. I'm Cliff Naylor, reporting for AgDay.
North Dakota farmers haven't had a break all summer and now fall from the drought. Last week's drought monitor showing the slightest of improvements in some categories due to some heavy rains in western counties. But those dry pastures and parched fields were simply shifted into a lesser intensity of drought. USDA releasing what analysts are calling a bearish cattle on feed report late Friday. Markets reacting to the downside and trade Monday. USDA counting 10.5 million head in August. That's up 4% year over year. However, placements catching analysts by surprise. Many expecting a drop, but USDA reporting placements up 3%, the largest for an August since 2012. Analysts say that will weigh heavily on markets in the first quarter of next year. Marketings in August were also 6% higher to just under 2 million head. An update now on a story out of Kansas. Tyson Foods may be considering as many as 20 alternative sites in the state after Leavenworth County withdrew plans to issue $500 million in bonds. The money for a proposed poultry processing facility there in northwest Kansas. The state Ag Secretary Jackie McClaskey says the other 20 communities in Kansas have expressed interest in becoming the new location for that $320 million facility. She worries the state could lose out on the 1,600 jobs. While efforts continue to do away with the much maligned waters of the U.S. rule, the EPA is working on a replacement. According to Politico, EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt says he hopes to propose a new form of the WOTUS rule in early 2018. Now, earlier this summer, Pruitt announced he hoped to have one in place by the end of the year. The waters of the U.S. rule was first put in the regulatory books back in 2015. It determines which waterways are under federal jurisdiction, which many farm groups thought was government overreach. Folks in Puerto Rico continue to try and get a handle on the impact of Hurricane Maria. They're facing heavy rains and threats that a dam there could fail. 70,000 people were in danger and asked to evacuate. Meanwhile, agriculture is big business in Puerto Rico. Its Department of Ag says the territory lost 80% of its crop value in the storm. Losses now nearing $800 million in that industry alone. Late planting this spring means some late cutting of silage. Mike Hoffman has those details in today's Crop Comments. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Clinton. We'll begin crop comments in Fallon, Nevada. Farm Journal colleague Annalisa Laka sent this from her family's farm while they're chopping silage. She says the farm sits at 4,600 feet above sea level in sandy soils. They irrigate and have cool nights even throughout the summer. To find the right silage for their farm, they run their own test plots. Annalisa covers the dairy industry for us. She says farmers in many parts of the country are getting a late start on their silage because of late maturing corn and cool weather. We found the same thing in northeast Indiana, where this dairy producer says they're 3 weeks behind.
Our early crops are not so good. What did make it aren't really making much of anything. So we have our fingers crossed that our corn silage will be fairly decent for us.
Of course, the later we get into September and heading into October, farmers run the risk of wet fall weather, further hampering efforts to get silage out of the field. And taking a look at the weather map, you can still see a hurricane off the east coast and a couple of high pressure systems keeping it kind of hot in the southeast. We'll let you know when it cools down and have your forecast coming up. But first, here are some hometown temps.
This is Machinery Pete, inviting you to check out my new website, machinerypete.com. Offering farmers tens of thousands of used equipment listings to search, let Machinery Pete help you find and value your next piece of used equipment.
Spring wheat was one of the hottest markets in the country earlier this year. Where are those prices now? What's next? Well, we'll get some answers in the Agribusiness Desk coming up. And later, these big birds are on a big-time comeback in the Golden State.
Ag Day, brought to you by Alivo Seed Treatment from Bayer. Protect your soybeans from SDS and nematodes this season.
In agribusiness, grains ending strong last week, but seeing a return to the red on Monday. Details now from the floor.
We're going to talk about soybeans today. A couple of factors that are giving the market some short-term weakness. We saw a very strong close on Friday and immediately coming back and coming under some pressure today. Number one is that harvest is on the rise. We had a lot of harvest activity over the weekend. We had hot and dry conditions across the central and eastern Corn Belt, and that's accelerating the harvest. Quite dry. We should see increasing cash movement over the near term. December cattle limit down today on Monday. Cattle on feed report was out on Friday, the number one big factor for the break. The numbers came in higher than expected for placements. But what really hurt the December contract is that feeder cattle that were 800 to 899 pounds, the heavier weight feeder cattle group, that was up 12% from a year ago. These are cattle that are going to be due to market probably before the end of the year. So this really put extra pressure on the December contract on top of the other factors in the cattle on feed report, which were bearish.
Tommy Grisafi, Advanced Trading, our guest here at the Agribusiness Desk. Tommy, as we talk about some of the spring wheat markets, earlier this year, really hot market when we had that drought going on and crop conditions kept going down. Where do we stand today?
Well, the drought was real,
and
it really affected things tremendously. Some of the yields on the eastern part of the state in Minnesota were a little better than expected. Some of the west weren't nearly, they were bad, but they weren't as bad. And so the market did what its job is. It went from 550 to 850 to, hey, buy less wheat from us. You're not going to buy less wheat from us or use less wheat, we'll get the price up. It's kind of coming to hurt us now because when the wheat showed up, the price came down. And then we had this monster called Russia who produced just a record-breaking wheat crop. So all the disaster we had in America, and this is where the American farmers sometimes struggles in marketing, is that they say, you don't understand, our wheat crop's ruined. I said, you don't understand, Russia has so much wheat, they're selling it cheaper than you are.
Okay.
And so we had all the mixture for a bull market, and we did. It was crazy bull market for a few months, and then it ended, and now it probably got cheaper than we realized. Spring wheat went down to $6.10, $6.15 the other day. It's since rallied, but maybe we get back in that $6.50, $7 range. Is it better than where we were a year ago when we were $5.50? Yes, but not that much better. And so when your yield goes down, which most growers up there's yield went down, and then the market's $1 higher, it's just equaling out. So
yeah. So as you start to look into next year, was there enough rally there? Did people plan far enough ahead at that time to maybe keep some of these acres or add acres for next year?
There was a point when the wheat was up and you're looking at $7 D17 or D18 spring wheat, and guys say, I'm going to put more wheat acres in. But if they didn't sell that wheat there or protect it, they probably said, you know what, I might just plant more soybeans next year because wheat scents come down. So if wheat goes up during the winter, or Australia has a chance of not finishing up well, they're having some weird weather down there, but we have that big monster over there, Russia, willing to sell wheat at an affordable price. And we did see an acre shift, and it's probably shifting back out.
Okay, well, we'll keep an eye on it. Thanks, Tommy. We'll be back with more AgDay in just a minute.
Interested in spending a day with a trader? Call Tommy Grisafi at 800-664-4383. AgDay weather, brought to you by Kawasaki and the new Mule Pro FXR side-by-side. Ride like a boss with high-end styling and rugged capability.
Welcome back to AgDay. Here, meteorologist Mike Hoffman. Mike, when's fall coming back? This summer was nice. We enjoyed summer, but now it's time for another season. When's that show?
Yeah, the Corn Belt had a late summer, which in a lot of cases was more summer than it had earlier.
Right,
all
exactly.
Summer long. But yeah, it's going to be cooling down in the entire Corn Belt the rest of this week. And it's basically the cooler air behind the cold front coming eastward. It's not exactly blasting east, but it is coming east, and it will cool everybody back down to more typical numbers for this time of the year, at least, like I said, through the Corn Belt. Still watching Maria offshore. It's going to cause some issues on the outer banks of North Carolina, but basically this one looks like it's going to stay offshore and continue to weaken and then eventually move eastward into the Atlantic. So let's put the maps into motion. High pressure kind of moving southward now across the Tennessee Valley. Excuse me, as the cold front from the west comes in, it's kind of shoving it that way. Maria not moving too quick, so it is going to cause some high waves and surf and a little bit of rain along the eastern portions of the coast with North Carolina. And you can see eventually that will start to move eastward. So the cold front during the day tomorrow, we'll see some showers and thunder showers develop along it, but there's not a lot of moisture to be had here as high pressure settles into the Gulf of Mexico, kind of keeping a lot of that moisture to the south. You can see some hit and miss variety thunderstorms once again developing in parts of the Four Corner region. There's the precipitation estimate over the past 24 hours. Adding on the next 36, you can see we get a little bit more in Texas and Oklahoma. Some of those areas end up with a fair amount of rain over a two or 3 day period here. Just some lighter amounts along that cold front in parts of the Ohio Valley, central Mississippi Valley. Snowfall, it's all higher elevation. As you can see out west, not a lot of it, but even into the mountains of Colorado, seeing some of that snow. There's high temperatures today, 80s and 90s, all the way from the Great Lakes into the Gulf Coast area, 50s and 60s behind the front. Pretty quick change there. But with the front not blasting east, it's just going to be a few areas each day. We'll see that big change. Lows tomorrow morning in the 40s, maybe even upper 30s in parts of North Dakota. Still muggy in the southeast. Still hot and humid, though, from Pennsylvania and New York through the southeast during tomorrow afternoon, but turning more typical across the northern plains. And that's all because of this trough that kind of digs in a little bit. Then it digs in a little bit more by this weekend, so that could be a chilly shot of air and it looks like kind of things are moving west to east as we head into early next week, so changes coming throughout that time. That's a look across the country. Now let's take a look at some local forecasts. We'll head out to Hobbs, New Mexico. First of all, cloudy and cooler showers and a thunderstorm in some areas, high of 69. Madison, Wisconsin, partly sunny, a thunderstorm in some areas as well, high of 83. And finally, Macon, Georgia, sunny and very warm, high 91.
When we come back, it's our dairy report, including some expert expectations on milk markets. And later, the California condor was on the brink of extinction. Now numbers are soaring. That story on In the Country.
AgDay, brought to you by Balchem, standing beside you for 50 years, bringing real results to the dairy industry. Now through the Real Faces of Dairy project, you can share your story at realfacesofdairy.com.
Green Acres. I don't know why I have that song in my head. Dun, 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 dun. All right, let's go.
The Dairy Report on AgDay is brought to you by QLF. For 40 years, QLF has been proud to support American farmers that feed the world.
From our partners at Milk Magazine and Dairy Herd Management, strong milk production numbers and slowing exports, tugging on milk prices. Economists telling editor Jim Dickrell that the culmination of little things are likely to take $1 off the top of milk prices. The Economist now forecasting $17 Class 3 milk in the fourth quarter of 2017 and on into 2018. Now on the production side, dairy cow culling picked up speed in August. USDA says culling rose nearly 9% year over year and was also higher than July. Nearly 266,000 dairy cows went to slaughter in August, and for the year, that culling number's up roughly 80,000 cows compared to a year ago. Record milk production in New Zealand has led the nation to triple the amount of imported U.S. distillers' dried grains with solubles. The U.S. Grains Council reporting that the 2017 milk supply in New Zealand is expected to reach nearly 22 million tons, beating a prior record set back in 2014. The Grains Council says grain buyers significantly increased purchases due to local crop failures and local market limitations. Still to come, we'll head to the dairy state of California, where these big birds are once again on the rise.
In the Country, sponsored by Kubota. Discover the power behind the M6 series at Kubota.com. Or visit your local Kubota dealer today.
The endangered California condor is making a slow but steady comeback in the wild 3 decades after the giant bird nearly went extinct. There are now about 450 condors, including about 270 in the wild, mostly in the southwest United States. Terry Shea shows us how the recovery efforts took flight.
In the coastal mountains of central California, biologists closely monitor an endangered icon. The California condor is one of the world's largest birds, with wingspans reaching 10 feet. The giant vultures once patrolled the skies from Mexico to Canada, but in the 20th century they almost went extinct.
It's still one of the most critically endangered species in the world. However, we've been able to increase the population from just 22 birds in 1982 to now somewhere around 450. When we get them from captivity, they go here.
Condors are now reproducing in the wild and expanding their range in California, Arizona, Utah, and Mexico. Biologists say the biggest threat is lead ammunition, which can poison the scavengers when they eat dead animals shot with lead bullets. Despite opposition from gun owners, California is banning lead ammo for hunting statewide to protect condors and other wildlife.
That's purely made out of copper.
The Ventana Wildlife Society gives away copper bullets to hunters and ranchers.
We're already starting to see fewer lead deaths. The condors are surviving longer. Their blood lead levels are coming down.
This year, the San Diego Zoo celebrated the birth of its 200th condor. Chicks live here for about a year as they prepare for life in the wild.
That chick does not see a human. Everything is done through a hand puppet or parents raising a chick. And all through that process, that chick is reinforced that it is a condor and not a person.
They're very interested in us. They're a very curious species.
This condor sanctuary in Big Sur is one of several sites where captive bred birds are released. About 170 condors now live in California, scavenging, breeding, and raising chicks on their own.
I hope that I'm out of a job soon because condors don't need to be managed in the future. I hope that they are self-sustaining and wild and free and nobody needs to trap or tag or monitor them.
It's a hope that could become reality if California condors stay on their current flight path. Terry Che, Associated Press, Big Sur, California.
Thanks, Terry. That's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you tuned in. Start your day with us. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day in farm country.
AgDay is powered by Ram Trucks, America's longest-lasting pickups.